myself again. My name is Atlin Ford, and I'm the CEO of Communicate Inclusively. And today we're speaking about diversity, equity and inclusion, pushback and fatigue. Oh, brilliant. Thank you for confirming you can hear me now. That's great. And so I really wanted to talk about this topic today because we shared some content on our newsletter and also on our social feeds and an article on the website, and we had an amazing response to this. So I think it's very timely, but also something very personal to me. I felt certainly there's been a change over the last, I'd say, 6 months or so with regards to how people are kind of interacting with diversity, equity and inclusion and the sentiment and feel around it. But also just in terms of that mission and that drive and that objective, I feel that there can be elements of fatigue when you feel like you're not meeting your objectives. And so this is why I think it's a really good topic to cover today. And I'm really pleased that you're here with me. This is going to be an interactive session. Obviously, people have been engaging already by telling me that the microphone's not working. So thank you for that. But we want to continue that along that line. So please do feel free to share your comments in the chat. And I've also got a poll on the next slide. So it'd be great to kind of get your engagement with that too. And so I'd love to find out from you in terms of your well-being. And this is what I was just speaking about in terms of taking things, quite personally myself, that when things don't often go the way that you want them to go, when you do feel that pushback, that you can take it quite personally and can have a real impact on you. And so I really wanted people to share their experiences either via the QR code there. It will take you to slido.com, and you can share your thoughts in terms of how you've been feeling as a change maker. Have you felt burnt out at times? You can also share it in the chat if you're not able to use the Slido. Have you felt burnout at times? You're on this journey, you're trying to create change in your organizations, but it can be quite exhausting. And so I certainly have felt burnt out at times, and I've had to recharge myself and come back again. And so, let us know if you've experienced burnout as a change maker, because it certainly is a real thing. And what about your confidence? Again, when you do get pushback, when your executive suite or your other people in the business maybe don't agree with what you're proposing, or if there's slow progress, it can dent your confidence. And so, again, if anyone has experienced this, please do share via the poll or in the chat. And the last one is around fear. I think diversity, equity, inclusion is quite an emotive topic. And certainly I felt fear, I felt dissonance, and I felt a lot of frustration along the journey around different initiatives I've been trying to implement. Those uncomfortable conversations, can create fear within you. And so maybe there are other things that you've experienced with regards to your well-being. But as a change maker, I think this is quite normal to have all of these reactions because these things, are natural when you're dealing with someone that you really care about. So, but how do we deal with them? How can we, cope and manage with these experiences and these feelings when dealing with D&I? Well, there are certainly a few things that we can do along the way. It's really about building resilience, okay? And I think the top one here on the list is really important with regards to, building a support network of support and allies. And so that could be your diversity, equity and inclusion committee. That could be your executive sponsors. If you're in an employee resource group, it could be that they are your allies and your champions. But certainly no one should be an island when it comes to building an inclusive workplace culture. You really do need those allies and champions to be there for you. When you are having those frustrating moments, it's great to be able to turn to someone who truly understands your mission and can be there to support you and guide you through those moments. And so that's the top one in terms of building resilience as a change maker. Ensure you do have a network of allies and champions around you. The second one is also really important, and that is celebrating the small wins and the milestones. So no matter how small or big that achievement is, certainly celebrate it. And I think it's not only good for you as a change maker, it's really good for your organization, because quite often it's a group effort in terms of that win. And so I think it's really great to acknowledge what you've done, whether that has been to implement a new policy, whether that's been that you've held a webinar like this within your organization. Maybe you've created an employee resource group. Perhaps there was an issue with regards to recruitment, and you managed to create some more diversity within your organizations. These are all wins, and they should certainly be celebrated if you put your time and energy into making them happen. To practice self-care and stress management techniques. So if you know it is becoming too much, you are feeling increasingly frustrated, you do feel that your confidence is really dipping, then maybe you need to step away for a short time. And that could be a month, it could be longer, it could just be for a day. But do acknowledge that feeling. Don't feel that you have to push through. You know, quite often we do that. We can feel it within ourselves that we're feeling stressed and that, you know, we're not feeling good about what we're doing and what's happening around us. But we tell ourselves we need to push through. Well, you don't. You know, self-care is really important and the fight continues. And so if you can have a break, you can always come back when you're feeling better and more able to manage the situation. I'd even say if there's an uncomfortable conversation, if you're feeling like, you know, it's not good for you to be in that conversation, then just say to the person, I need to step away right now. Or if you're in a meeting, it doesn't feel good, you know, be able to step away from that and really look after yourself. That's the most important thing. And the last thing I'd say is to seek out a mentor and guidance. You know, other people who have done this, you know, maybe they've are ahead of you in terms of their D&I journey. Maybe it's just someone who you admire and is, you know, ready and willing to help and support you. But mentorship is extremely important, no matter where you are in your career or journey, whether you're a leader, a CEO, everyone could do with mentorship. So certainly I'd recommend seeking those out. But do acknowledge that, you know, you do need to build resilience, but you do also need to look after yourself. And these are the 4 things that I'd highly recommend for you. If anyone's got any other suggestions in terms of how they build resilience, please do share it in the chat. It would be great to hear your thoughts on that too. But why does D&I pushback happen? And I think this is a really important thing for us all to understand. Does anyone want to share, again, in the chat, why do they think that D&I pushback is occurring right now? You know, there are many things happening around the world, but even on a kind of more macro level, maybe there are other reasons why there is D&I pushback. I think understanding the reasons behind D&I pushback is crucial for a productive dialogue and creating a truly inclusive workplace, because I do think it's going to be a common thing that we're all going to be experiencing. So the first thing is fear. And we mentioned fear as a change maker, but also I think there's fear on the other side. People in your organization may feel unsettled, that D&I often involves restructuring workflows or revisiting and revising policies and adapting new ways of working. And so this can really create fear and feelings of uncertainty amongst people. And then when you have fear, people often take a flight or fight approach. And this is often where you can have that D&I pushback, because they are feeling fear around this issue. I think the other thing to consider is misconceptions. So there are many misconceptions, I'd say, around DEI. Many believe that it's unnecessary. They think that in their world, in their experience, everything's absolutely fine. And so, you know, perhaps for them, they are misunderstanding why there's a particular need for it. I mean, this can often lead to feelings of reverse discrimination. And maybe you've heard this term, and I do believe this is down to misconceptions around it. And quite often you have to then think about sharing lived experiences as a way of dealing with that misconception. Because I believe, and I've seen, that when people kind of hear the lived experiences of others, especially colleagues that they've known throughout their business, it can really kind of demystify some of the things that people think around diversity, equity and inclusion when they hear someone's lived experiences, which is so different to them. But because they haven't walked in those shoes, they just really can't understand it. And so I do think a misconception is another key thing that we'd have to consider as one of the core reasons behind D&I pushback. Yeah, fixed mindsets. People don't want to unlearn in order to rebuild. I really believe that's true. So thank you for sharing that, Shane. I believe that many people, especially if they're maybe slightly older, they've held their views for so long. And so it can be really hard for them to kind of dismantle and have to kind of relearn things. And I guess that would perhaps make someone feel quite fearful. The other thing that I've heard is that, you know, D&I is really focusing on difference. But, you know, for me, in many of my initiatives, we're celebrating that difference. Difference is a really positive thing. We can't ignore it. We are all very different, but people may feel that we overemphasize the differences between people rather than focusing on the shared goals. But I think it's a really important balance when you're working in diversity, equity, inclusion to celebrate the differences, but also to highlight the similarities. Because when it comes down to a very emotional level, when dealing with some of these things, I think people can really resonate and understand. But also, I think it's important that you focus on issues that are very relevant within your organization. And then this is where people can really truly understand that there is very much similarities in terms of the emotional impact, and they can really relate to what we're talking about because it's actually impacting people within their organization. Now, if you're talking about, protected characteristics or issues within D&I that are not happening within your organization, then it can feel quite removed. And so again, I would certainly recommend thinking about that engagement level and making it very relevant to your immediate organization. There's a psychological threat, so a status threat, and I think this comes back to Shane's point around, I'm quite comfortable in my position, and all this talk about diversity, equity, inclusion is actually threatening my status. I think employees perceive gains for minority groups as a loss for themselves. And I think this is one of the real core things that we're finding with more privileged groups are now pushing back and feeling like, oh, maybe perhaps I'm not going to have this privilege anymore. But in actual fact, the privilege that you had was putting others at a disadvantage. And what we're trying to do right now is to level the playing field. I'm sure a term that you've all heard before. And so this kind of status threat, again, leads to fear. This can lead to resistance. And I think this is one of the core things I think that's happening right now. We want to stop this movement. I want to put up some resistance because in actual fact, what's happening is threatening me. There's a status threat and it's actually going to impact maybe my next career move or my chance to get, some kind of financial benefit or my chance to have an opportunity to feature within an event or whatever it may be. I think when it comes down to impacting the individual, it really is a significant threat to them. Quinn says pushback experience as deprioritizing of funds, and time resources in an environment of underfunded charity sector. Yeah, exactly as I was just saying. So again, that status threat, if you feel like other groups are going to be getting funding and that means that you're not, then obviously, people are going to maybe feel that they want to resist this change and by any means necessary prevent that change from happening. And then the last one, again, is similar to what Shane was saying with regards to this moral conflict, that people who hold very strong beliefs on equality may feel conflicted when a D&I initiative highlights historical or ongoing inequalities or bias they may not have been aware of. And so, again, you can often find this thing when it comes to, I'd say, race or disability. People are very ableist and hadn't even realized they're doing it. This is this unconscious bias. And so it's like a moral conflict. And then they can feel, I guess, quite guilty, I think sometimes, or personal responsibility, because in actual fact, they maybe had done something or someone in their family or in their history had done something that was, again, not necessarily aligned with how they feel at the moment. So these are just a couple of areas in which I feel that people are pushing back on diversity, equity and inclusion right now. But then what does that actually lead to? Okay, what does this sense of pushback actually mean in real terms for us as change makers? Firstly, I think denial, disengagement, like I'm just not going to be part of this. I just don't want nothing. I don't want nothing to do with it. And a derailment, which I think is the worst one. Really, they're trying to stop the progress and stop this thing from happening by any means necessary. And so maybe some of you have experienced this. So in terms of denial, downplaying the existence of a problem that D&I aims to address. For example, statements like, we don't have a gender pay gap here. Well, maybe they can't see it because it's not impacting them. I don't see colour. Again, trying to downplay these really big issues through denial. And the denial could be a pushback, or it could actually be that they just got no idea because it's not their lived experience. It could be this disengagement where there's just apathy or feeling that the issue doesn't concern them. And this is what I was saying about the engagement and really ensuring that the issues that you are focusing on are relevant to your organization, because I guess it prevents this disengagement because the people that you sit next to have actually experienced this problem and they're saying they have. And again, the data is really important for this and getting feedback from your colleagues. But you quite often will find with sometimes when you do D&I initiatives, certain groups just won't attend, won't take part. And perhaps that would mean, sorry, forgive me. Sorry, dog issues here. Okay. And then the last one is the derailment one, which I think can be really impactful in terms of what we're seeing a lot right now in terms of shifting the focus to other problems. So, around the time of the George Floyd murder, there was a big focus on D&I. There were funds, everyone was really about trying to make a big change, and we're really focused on it. But now there is this derailment. We want to shift our focus away from diversity, equity, and inclusion, by using comments like, shouldn't we focus on performance instead? And again, you may find this when it comes to recruitment, that they'll often say, I just picked the best person for the job, rather than really looking at the processes of a recruitment. How can we make the pool wider? So these are some of the things that you may be experiencing: denial, disengagement, and derailment of your diversity, equity, and inclusion. But the important thing, and really at the crux of this presentation, how do we overcome this D&I pushback? How do we stand strong against all of these things? And there are a few things that we can do. The first one is open communication. And so, as I said before, sometimes you can feel quite emotionally attached to what you're doing. And this just shows that you really care about it. But I do think that communication and honest dialogue is really the best way sometimes to get through this thing. There will be feelings of discomfort when people are talking about this. But I do think that trying to have this kind of open communication and yourself not being too defensive about it is one of the really important ways of trying to deal with this. So leadership should be actively listening and addressing these concerns directly with transparency and empathy, whilst clarifying the goals. And again, I do think that if you have a very clear diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy, and that it is based on data, and that you talk about why these things are really important, and again, back to the relevance in terms of your organization and why you're doing these particular things, and getting as many people around the table as possible. If you do have a diversity, equity, inclusion committee, have everyone kind of take part in that conversation around building the strategy. And certainly you want to be including your leaders, your executive sponsors in that conversation, and having communication with them. This will help you to overcome resistance, especially, again, if you can talk about empathy and allyship as values within your organization. Then certainly if someone is having a worse experience within your organization and experiencing discrimination, how could someone really, if you explain it in a very clear and open manner, not want to make a change in that area? The second one here is to focus on the benefits. So clearly communicate the positive impact of diversity, equity, and inclusion on the organization. Highlight how a diverse and inclusive workforce fosters innovation, it strengthens talent acquisition and retention, it can reduce absenteeism, it can improve the overall decision-making within the organization. And I think we always have to be reinforcing and reminding people about the positive outcomes that diversity, equity, and inclusion brings. Really focusing on the business case, because quite often in organizations, when you talk about the business case, especially when it's a commercial benefit, people open up their ears and they start listening. And so again, although it's the right thing to do, there are so many kind of personal benefits to the individuals that benefit from not having been discriminated against. I think from a business and the workforce perspective, especially when it's talking to leaders and those that are trying to push back, if you focus on the commercial benefit, it can often kind of create more ease around the topic of diversity, equity, and inclusion. I mentioned data just a moment ago, and this can really help you with that business case. But I think when you're developing your strategies, it's really important to use data to determine why you're doing something, but also to set metrics from the outset. So, for example, if you have a strategy and one of your objectives is to create, a more diversity within your leadership team, then you may want to consider, we're going to be focusing on gender. And so we really like to see a 50-50 split within our leadership team on gender. I'm picking quite an easy one here just to make the example. But then, if at the start of the year, at the start of your D&I strategy, you've got maybe a 30-70 split, you can, at the end of the time when you've implemented all your interventions, you can show that we've reached the target and that we've been successful in delivering that. And so I think not only is it important to do your data and metrics at the beginning, but you also need to do them at the end. And I think if you are developing a strategy, it's always really important to set success measures. And success measures could be something much smaller than that. It could be that, we're going to be creating content on the key themes that we've identified. And that could be something like, it could be race and religion, or it could be around allyship, or it could be around disability and neurodiversity. We're going to be increasing awareness on these topics to help everyone in our organisation to feel a sense of belonging. And we're going to be sharing articles and content about this. And so the success measure could be the number of people that actually open and read the emails, or the number of people that click on the article and read it. It doesn't have to be like a big movement in terms of the people within the business. It could be something as simple as that. But I think showing that 80% of people in the business read this article, and that 15% of people actually commented under the article. That's shown that there is engagement, and the people in the business are really interested in this theme and topic, and can help you to build on that for the next year, and to continue to create policies around those particular topics. We also use this in Pepper to identify what colleagues were interested in. We shared a lot of content in the beginning of our journey, but we were able to track which articles had the most engagement, and this also was an indication of what colleagues were interested in within the business. So always along your journey, try to find ways to implement metrics and data to help you to prevent and overcome that D&I pushback. Empathy and education, again, I've touched on this a little bit before with regards to sharing lived experiences. But foster understanding by providing D&I resources, training and workshops that equip employees with the knowledge and the skills to navigate a diverse workplace. Encourage employees to consider different perspectives and lived experiences to promote empathy and cultural competency. So quite often you don't know what you don't know. Quite often we find that within our personal circles, people are very similar to ourselves. And this is why the workplace is a perfect place to kind of open people's minds and to educate them about things that maybe they would never experience in their real life. Maybe they would never engage with someone on a kind of a one-to-one basis that was from a very much of a different religion from them, a different race, a different age, etc., a different sexual orientation. And so I also think in terms of kind of sharing lived experiences, you can get speakers to come in, you can get trainers to come in. But I found that, having colleagues in your business to talk about lived experiences is the most impactful. And quite often when we've had people to share their stories, whatever that may be, around maybe socioeconomic status, people can really relate to that topic, and it can be a really good introduction to diversity, equity and inclusion. People feel less uncomfortable when talking about socioeconomic background because they can really relate to that. But then you may find when you have a conversation about race, people may find that more difficult. But if you have people within the business from different ethnic backgrounds talking about their experience and how maybe they've experienced discrimination, you probably will build more empathy and get people to understand what it is really like and what it really means. Obviously, we've had some examples recently with regards to the election, and this has really brought to the fore, some people's really strong views. But you can use that, I think, also as a way to build empathy. You can use external examples, such as, Rishi Sunak experiencing racial abuse. You can bring that in as an example into your business. People can relate to it and really understand how, unacceptable that behavior is. But it can just get the conversation going with regards to race and other topics that are happening externally. Quite often you may have seen things around disability. People were traveling, they had a wheelchair, and they were stuck, in a very uncomfortable position for many, many hours whilst traveling. And again, people can have empathy and understanding when you talk about those stories. It's more impactful when it's someone they know, but I do think you can use a lot of kind of timely things that are happening in the press to make it very relevant to your organisation as well. And the last one on this slide is regarding collaboration. And this is really whereby you bring everyone together so they feel they're part of the decision making. They're part of this. And this is why if you do have a D&I committee, that it's important to have people from all different backgrounds that are taking part in this and helping. If people are actually invested in the decision making and helping to shape the D&I initiatives, then they're less likely to push back. They're less likely to kind of stop and want to deny or do any of the things that we spoke about earlier, because they're actually part of it. And so for us, what we do as a D&I committee and as consultants when we're creating initiatives is that we try to engage as many people and try to get volunteers from across the business, across the hierarchies. And we touch on many different topics and subjects. So people feel like maybe they don't want to get involved in a focus group on sexual orientation, but maybe it's something about caring responsibilities would certainly interest them. But I do think it's really important that when you're doing something that you try to engage as many people from across the business as possible, because when they're part of it, it's so much harder for people to push back on those things and those initiatives. I don't know if anybody else has got any other suggestions with regards to what they've done to overcome D&I pushback, because the more that we hear, the better. But one thing I will say is don't ignore it. If you can address it, I think it's really important, because if there is D&I pushback within your organisation and it's not addressed, it can really create a climate of resentment and even more disengagement. Colleagues will feel that they're unheard. And sometimes, their pushback may be quite offensive, but I still think there is value in addressing it, because ultimately you don't want that person's negative experience, to impact the other great work that you're doing. So ultimately, failing to address D&I pushback, it can hinder progress towards a truly inclusive workplace, putting the organisation at a disadvantage. And you may need support with that conversation. You may need more than one person having to deal with it and engage with it. But certainly, I would recommend not ignoring it, to try to find a strategy, look at the things that we just suggested on the previous slide, and try to find a way to address it head on. And it may take you a bit of time to kind of deal with it, but I would not recommend ignoring it, because quite often these things do not go away. They just fester, and then the resentment builds, and then it can create something even worse. There are other things to consider, and I really think that sometimes having external support can be big value. I think when it's someone within your own organisation, it's very easy to push back. But if it's an external support, or maybe even very much a specialist in that area, especially if it's a complex challenge that you're dealing with, I think that can be one option to consider. Maybe you need to get support with your data and insights. And again, if an external agency comes in to help you with data and insights, it's very hard for people to poke holes in it if an external expert in data has come in to help you with that. But also, it could just be that there's limited capacity to do what you want to do, and maybe you just need some additional hands to help you to push things through. And I think that can be the other thing sometimes, that if the delivery of the D&I initiatives isn't polished, then again, this can be a reason why people may want to start pushing back and creating negativity around it. So, if you need external support, certainly consider that. But I know it's not always easy to secure your budget, but I think this is something really important, and shows your organization's commitment to really creating a change in the organization. So if you can, build out that diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy, use metrics and data to build it out, and then have the budget set from the beginning that we want to deliver, these 10 interventions throughout the year, but we need budget for each of them. We want to implement training. We're going to need budget for that. We want to have a drop-in. We're going to need funds for that. We want to get an external consultant to help us to deliver this focus group. We're going to need funding for that. We need to produce some marketing materials to share content and resources. We're going to need budget for that. Try to find a way to implement that from the beginning, and then that's not going to hold you back, because again, budget can be another way to resist and derail. So again, approach it in a very professional manner, and allocate those funds from the very beginning. I mentioned before, to demonstrate the ROI in terms of setting those success measures. Again, if you can allow those to really relate to your business strategy overall, then that's even a better win. But the other thing is that you want to secure ongoing funding and resources. Quite often we'll find there'll be a big push on D&I for a year or two, and then it slides away because there's no funding, there's limited resources. Try to find a way to have that long-term commitment from your organisation for funding and resources. And by having a D&I committee or a council or a staff network group, it maintains that longevity. So if you start to feel that you need to take a step away, you're getting burnt out, there's someone else in the fore. And the same as you'd have for a business, you do succession planning, again, for your staff network groups and for your D&I committees. Have a deputy. That's what I had, a deputy the whole time that I was the chair of the D&I committee, because when you're on holiday, things can still continue. And if there are other people that are showing a lot of interest and energy and motivation, then perhaps you can prepare them to also do additional things. People can take ownership of different work streams, and that can be another great way to create sustainability within your D&I strategy. So I've been speaking for a while. I'd like you guys to take a few minutes to reflect, really. The first reflection is on, what is the biggest challenge you anticipate facing in implementing D&I initiatives within your organisation? And I think it's quite important to preempt sometimes these challenges, because if you preempt them, then you can create a solution to it before it even happens. And quite often when things happen, you'll be like, I had a feeling that might happen. I had a feeling that person might say that. I had a feeling that person might do this, or that might be a problem later on. So if you can preempt your challenges, it's great to build in solutions for that. So that's the first one I'd like you to think about, what's the biggest challenge that you anticipate facing. The second one, again, is really important from a personal perspective, is to identify your personal strengths and skills that you can leverage in championing D&I. So when I started initially, when my microphone wasn't working, I spoke a bit about my background, which was, I spent many years working in marketing and communications and insights. And this has really helped me in terms of implementing, engaging diversity, equity, inclusion campaigns. And I've looked at them as campaigns. That's my strength, communication and engagement and the marketing background. So what is your personal strength and skill that you can leverage as a diversity and inclusion champion, and to focus on that? I mentioned the support network. I want you to think about who are the individuals or groups within your organization who can provide support and encouragement for your D&I efforts. I want you to think about who are those individuals in your organization right now, because this is really important that you build those relationships. You could even be honest and just say to them, would you be happy to be an ally for me? Like when, things maybe are not going so good, or when they are, would you be my champion? I really think you need to think about who those individuals are within your organization, because you will need them. And the last consideration I want you to think about are the resources. This can be a real way that people can push back and derail your efforts by not allocating adequate resources. So what additional resources do you need to really kind of build your D&I impact? Is it training? Is it budget? Is it data? Okay, so 4 things to reflect on: the challenges you anticipate, your personal strengths, who is your support network, and what resources do you need? So I want you guys to take actions away and to use this information to really help you. And if anyone wants to share, do please put it into the chat box. It'd be great to hear your thoughts on that one too. And so many of you who know me may have heard about the Diversity and Inclusion Changemaker program. And this is a topic that we cover extensively in the program. So as a change maker, I really identified that there was a need for support for change makers. Many of these people kind of stand up and put their hands up to be the D&I lead in their organizations, but they've got no training or experience in this. And you can do courses. Quite often they haven't been developed by change makers who have gone through the journey. So this is not only just about giving you the skills and the knowledge, it's really about giving you the support, the well-being support as well, and having a network of people that are going to be your allies and your champions within this group. So we did the program in January. It was a great success. We had 10 people who joined the program. This year, we're looking for 30 people to join the program, the second cohort in September. And if you are a change maker and you need a bit more additional support, you want to really build your skills and knowledge, I think this is a great program for you. I've designed it along with other experts who are change makers, really on our own experience. And this really just talks about why D&I change makers really matter. And for me, quite often the D&I changemaker is the catalyst for the change in the organization, but quite often not supported. You need to have a lot of energy and motivation to keep going. And this course is really to champion those D&I change makers, because without them, you probably would not see that catalyst and that transformation taking place. But often they do need to be upskilled. And this is what this program is about, but also providing that support and really focusing on your well-being. But I've just highlighted some of the things here that you probably know already about D&I change makers, that you are innovative problem solvers, because you will certainly face challenges and problems. Your culture trailblazers, you are transforming the workplace culture for everybody in your organization. Back to that kind of looking at the business case, you're enhancing performance within your organization, so you're making a real impact and creating equity for all, increasing job satisfaction, and all the other positive things that impact the bottom line within your organization. And then the last point, which I think is just so important, which I've kind of touched on before, it's really about community impact as well. Although you're a change maker within your organization and helping your workplace to be more inclusive, those individuals that are learning about lived experiences that they would never come across are going to go out into society and also be inclusive there. And so not only are you having a positive impact on your workplace, you are certainly having a positive impact in creating societal change as well. And so this is why I'm always championing D&I change makers, those advocates that are out there that maybe D&I is not their day job, but they're doing it side of desk and they really want to make an impact. And this is really what I want to do in this program, to arm you with the skills that you need. And so the course is led by a range of diversity experts. We offer our expertise and guidance. We have speakers who talk about their own lived experiences, but also those who have gone through the changemaker experience within their own organizations and created a transformation. The style of the program is really interactive. It's a 12-week program, and every 2 weeks we have a session whereby you get to learn a different topic. We also have a range of resources and toolkits, so when you go away, you can download them and use them when you go back to your workplaces. We have a mixture of primarily virtual sessions. We did have a launch event last year, which was really well attended, but we also look at having case studies and group discussions and real practical exercises to help you to build your expertise. And then the last, I think, is really important, really to focus on those networking and that real support network that we have within the organization, within the program, not just for the participants, but also the speakers. So even from our first cohort, we had, a CEO who was, a really inclusive leader. One of the participants on the program, was really inspired by them and has gone on to have a one-to-one with that person. They were open to meeting them outside of the program so they could really have a kind of one-to-one and really understand their needs and get some advice. And so your network is not only around your participants, your fellow participants on the program, but also those guest speakers as well. And these are just some of the topics that we cover. As I said, we do cover well-being and DEI pushback, but we also cover other things such as identifying your blind spots, looking at the metrics, again, feedback and surveys and other ways of gathering insights through qualitative and quantitative methods, developing that all-important strategy and including those success measures, inclusive communications and interventions and initiatives kind of off the back of identifying what your kind of key focus areas are going to be, how you can create a sustainable approach to D&I through D&I committees and staff networks, getting an executive sponsor, which is extremely important. We cover how you can do that. Sometimes, as a change maker, you can struggle to identify who your executive sponsor is, and we'll go through that within the program as well. But also, how do you create sustainability and long-term impact? And that's the thing, I think, as D&I champions, we don't want it to be a tick box exercise. We don't want it to be something that we do just for 1 year. We really want to create sustainability and strategies that can enable us to have long-term impact. And we go through that in quite a lot of detail within the program as well, and develop those frameworks and action plans and really speak the language of your leaders, because you quite often have to go back and make that business case. And that's what we're going to do also on the program. So if you're interested, you can use the QR code, or you can visit our website, or you can DM me or drop me an email at any moment in time to find out more. The second cohort launches in September, so there's lots of time to find out more information. And we're also trying to secure some funding so that we can provide discounted places as well. So, if the funds are an issue, if you're unable to get your organisation to fund your place, do please reach out, because we understand that can also be a challenge, and we don't want that to prevent people from joining the programme. We've tried to make it as affordable as possible. But if your company are supportive, we also have packages whereby you can include one-to-one coaching within that, or you can add on an audit for your organisation as well. So there's a few different options there for you. So if you do want to get in touch, you can follow us, Communicate Inclusively, that is, on LinkedIn or on Instagram, or you can follow me personally. I do share quite a lot of content on our D&I themes, but also our website. We've got so many different articles, resources, toolkits, checklists on a range of different D&I topics. And so, if you're interested in any of that, do have a look at the website. It's communicateinclusively.com, or you can drop me an email, and it's hello@communicateinclusively.com. So thank you for spending time with me this evening. If anyone has got any additional questions or thoughts, do please share it in the chat. I'd love to do a bit of a Q&A. So if you do have any thoughts or feedback or things you just want to discuss with regards to pushback that you've experienced, do please pop it in the chat, and then we'll be happy to go through that. So just go back to Quinn's comments. So the second thing that was mentioned here was that initial willingness has been stalled now. The reality of upfront resource costs has kicked in. Yeah. So I think this goes back to the funding. In terms of when there were free funds available, people were more inclined to do work around diversity, equity, and inclusion. But as those funds have been drawn back, and maybe it's not so easy to access funds for these initiatives, that people are less reluctant to use their own, resources to pay for diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. And this is, again, a bit of a derailment, because if there was true commitment, then they would be able to use those funds certainly for this work. Does anybody want to share any other questions or any thoughts on DEI pushback? Or should we continue to go and have our dinner and start our evenings of relaxation? I'll wait a few more minutes. And again, if anyone wants to just DM me personally, please feel free to do so. I'm via LinkedIn. I'm very active on there, and would be happy to speak to anyone on my DMs as well. Okay, everyone, thank you so much for joining the session today. I hope you found it helpful. And if you do need any additional support from my consultancy with regards to research and insights and metrics, or whether it's strategy development or training and workshops, do please get in touch as well for that. All right, everyone, have a wonderful evening. It's been amazing speaking with you. Bye-bye now.